Good morning, Standard 2. Today we're going to be learning how to write fractions on a number line. Fractions on a number line. So this is another way that you are able to write your fractions. It's pretty easy. Just follow along with me. So the number line, if you switch it this way, it kind of looks like an upside down letter I, right? But we're going to be using it this way. So the number line represents the entire whole. It represents 1. So when we're writing our number line, we first have to start off by labeling the number line. So the beginning of the number line would always be 0. It starts at a 0 and it will always end at a 1 for the kind of fractions that we are doing. So that will be 1. We are using our number line to represent a whole. So this could also represent an entire pizza, 1 orange. This represents a whole. A whole starts from 0 to 1. This number line is representing one whole, a whole. So I would like to write a fraction on this number line. So I'm going to go ahead and put my fraction here. And I'm going to show you how we're going to write this fraction on our number line. Alrighty, so my fraction is 3/4. 3/4. I would like to represent this fraction on my number line. So in order for me to represent it on my number line, I'm going to have to draw in lines in between. So how many lines will I draw in? So it's important to know that the 4 parts, the denominator, is already represented on this line. So the 1 is the same as 4/4, which represents the whole, and our fraction tells us how many parts we should have. So this fraction has 3/4, which means I should have 4 equal parts here. So 4/4 is also 1. So to start off, I'm going to go ahead and put my 4/4 right under here so that I remember, even though the 1 also represents 4/4. So this is where 4/4 is, and I want to fill in my number line to represent 3/4. So I'm going to go ahead and start. So I need to ensure that I have equal spaces. I gave you a worksheet where the spaces are already measured for you, so you won't have to be drawing in your spaces, right? So when we're counting our spaces, we're not counting the lines that we're drawing in, we're going to be counting the spaces in between. So for example, from 0 to about here, let me put a little line so that I can draw in my line when I put it down. This would represent 1 space, 2 space, 3 space. So let me go ahead and draw in my lines, and then I'll put it back up so that you all can see it, because I can't draw it up there in the air while I have it showing up. Okay, so I'm drawing them in as equal as I can. Then we'll look at some more examples where it's already drawn for us, so we don't have to draw it in. Okay, right here. So I just drew in 3 lines, but I'm not counting the lines, I'm counting the space. So from 0 to here, that represents 1 space, and I'm just going to put little symbols at the top so we can see what I'm referring to. So from 0 to the first line, this represents 1 space. From this line in between here, 2 space. In between here, 3 spaces. In between here, 4 spaces. We're counting the spaces because the spaces in between represents a part of a whole. Remember, we are doing fractions, and fractions are part of a whole. So from here to here is 1, 2, 3, 4. We now have our fraction line divided into 4, but we will go ahead and label each of these fractions. So from this 0 to the first line, that is our first fraction. So that would be 1/4. 4. Why 4? Because our total is 4 out of 4. This is the fraction that we're trying to represent on our line. So this would be one space. That would be 1 out of 4. The fraction is 1/4. Here will be 2 out of 4 and 3 out of 4. And at the end, we have our 4 out of 4, which is also represented as 1. So we just made a fraction on a number line. So let's go ahead and take a look at some other examples. So I have this fraction strip here, and I want to go ahead and fill it in correctly to represent a fraction. So the first thing that I'm going to put at the beginning of the fraction will always be a 0 because it starts off at 0. And at the end of my fraction, I'll put the number 1 because 1 represents a whole. Now, as you can see, I already have some fractions here, and I want to fill in the missing fraction on the number line. So how will I count it? Remember, I'm counting my spaces because my space represents a part of a whole. So from 0 to the first line is 1, but I want to count all the spaces first so I can find out what my denominator is. So I will go ahead and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The total amount of spaces represent my denominator. So my denominator is 6. So if I need to label this fraction, I will go ahead and say from 0 to here will be 1 out of 6. So I'm going to go ahead and write 1, 6. 2 6's already here for me. This will be 3 out of 6, 4 out of 6, 5 over 6, and then number 1 represents 6 over 6. So we just filled in another number line. Let's go ahead and take a look at another example. So for this example, I'm going to have a little icon on top of one of the number lines, and I would like to find out what that is. So here I have a blank number line, and I have a little heart at this number line, and I want to find out, well, what fraction is this representing? How do I find that out? I'm going to go ahead and start labeling from the beginning and count the spaces and fill in my number line to find out what this symbol is representing here. So let's go ahead. We're going to start off with 0. So I'm going to put my 0 here. And at the end of the fraction line, the number is going to be 1. So I have my start, which is 0, and my number that represents a whole, which is 1. The fraction line always represents one whole. So let's go ahead and count all our spaces so we can find out what our denominator is. 1, 2, 3. As you can see, we have 3 spaces. We count the spaces in between because we're counting parts of the fraction. So we have 1, 2, 3. So our first number here will be 1/3. So I'm going to go ahead and write my fraction here. This will be 1/3. Then I count the other space from here to here is 2/3. So I'll write 2/3, my fraction there. And then at the end, we know that number 1 represents 3 over 3, same as 1. So the symbol here was showing me 2/3 of the fraction. So the fraction line, fractions on a number line, can also be shown with the lines not drawn through and through. This is another way that it can be shown, and this is the paper that you have and we completed today. So let's take a look at how we're going to do it on our fraction line when the lines are not up throughout the line. These are both representing the same thing. It's just that there are little differences with the drawing on this one. So let's go ahead and do the first one together. So I will always start it off at a 0. and the end of it is going to be 1. Now remember, in order for me to fill in my fraction on my number line, I have to count the spaces in between. So let's go ahead. This will be 1, 2. So my denominator is 2. So when I count from 0 to 1, I have 1 over 2. So I will go ahead and put 1 over 2 here, and that represents half. Now if we look at this fraction, we can see that it is only divided into half. So this would be 1/2, and this would represent 2 over 2, which is the same as 1. So go ahead to the next slide and complete the worksheet and the activities that I have when you're filling in your fraction with the number line. Bye.